Scary Parrish, welcome to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me, and we're going to be here on CBS Sports Network for the next hour discussing the sport of college basketball. And the place to start, I think, is in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And it's not for great reasons. I don't know if you heard, but John Calipari, he left Kentucky. He's now the coach at Arkansas. They hired him for a lot of money, and then they gave him a lot of money to buy a team via NIL. So he bought a bunch of good players. The roster was so good that it was preseason top 20 in the AP poll. But right now, Arkansas 0-5 in the SEC, projected to miss the NCAA tournament. Norlander, we polled more than 100 college basketball coaches last offseason from all levels of the sport. And we asked them who was the best hire of 2024. They told us it was John Calipari, and it's still too early to, rule on that completely, but it's obviously not off to a great start. Right now, you might call it the worst. What happened? Why has this gone so poorly?
He didn't recruit the right roster. He isn't coaching the pieces the right way. And John Calipari going into this season, coaching Arkansas was one of the biggest stories in the sport. And now, as we have crossed the halfway point, it remains one of the biggest stories of the sport, but for not for the reasons that we thought. I've got the numbers on it because I pulled it up too, what that Candid Coaches story we did. So we pulled more than 100 coaches. Cal won comfortably, 43.4% of the vote. Dusty May was number 2, and that's off to a nice start at Michigan. He was 21.7. Mark Pope was third place, 8.5% though. You see what Kentucky's doing. And then Pat Kelsey at Louisville and Kevin Young both shared 4.7% of that vote. Looking at this now, it's pretty stark. It's pretty stunning. I think West Virginia's Darren DeVries got either 1 or 2 votes total in that poll. And you look at what he's doing with maybe 40% of the NIL allotment that Cal had at Arkansas, maybe. And he's got, a 13-4 team that is pacing toward the NCAA tournament. Here are 3 quotes that we got from coaches last summer doing this poll. 1, Cal stayed too long in Kentucky. He knows that now, but I talked to him on the road, and you can just tell that a weight is lifted off him. I'll be shocked if he doesn't go to another Final Four. He's going to win big again. He has everything he needs to win big again. That's quote number 1. Quote number 2. He will be extra motivated in the SEC at a school that has more than enough resources to compete at the highest level. No one is better than Cal at reinventing himself and creating the us against the world mentality that will ultimately get him back to the top. And then quote number 3, Calipari is the best hire. His track record at every stop is the highest, and it's the highest level in the sport. Arkansas may sneak into his best spot with all of this, the reserves that he has, the fan support, and the backdrop of less attention will give him some freedom to breathe. He will enjoy it there more. None of that is bearing out to be. It is shocking to see that Arkansas is such a non-factor in the SEC and has become one of the most disappointing teams, and it is in the running now for the most disappointing team in the entire country at this point. But despite having as big or nearly as big of an NIL war chest in year 1, it hasn't mattered. Janelle Davis is nothing like the player he was at FAU. That's been a big factor in addition to a lot of other things. But yeah, they're sitting here at 0-5 in the SEC. And I don't, Parrish, do you think that they can turn this? 1, why do you think it hasn't worked? And 2, do you think this is a possible for an in-season turnaround? Because I don't think it's possible. I think John Calipari and the Razorbacks are destined to miss the NCAA tournament in his first season.
I wouldn't use words like possible and impossible and destined. I'd leave a little more wiggle room than that. I would agree that it's unlikely, improbable that they'll turn this around. They've shown at no point this season that they're a good basketball team. And when you haven't shown for 2+ months that you're a good basketball team, I don't know that I can just expect you in late January to turn it around in the best basketball league in the country. Like, you got one good win all season. Now you're supposed to just go start stringing victories against good teams one after the other. Maybe, crazier things have happened. Not much crazier, but crazier things have happened. But it seems improbable at this point. So what happened? I've had a million different people ask me that question. Another million people offer theories. I think the first thing that people miscalculate on this is that the outsider's perspective is that John Calipari needed to reinvent himself, that John Calipari needed to go to Fayetteville and be something very different than he had been in Lexington. But you know who I don't think believed that? I don't think John Calipari believed that. because though he did get run out of Kentucky after a loss to Oakland, knowing the way his mind works, I bet you when he looks back on the ending at Kentucky the last few years, he would insist to you that it's not as bad as people made it out to be. You know, he won the SEC in 2020. That's the season that we cut short because of the pandemic, but they won the SEC that year. And then the next year was the year that was constantly interrupted by COVID, and they were not good and missed the NCAA tournament. But I bet you he blames that on the pandemic, not on his ability to coach a basketball team. And then the 3 subsequent years after that, 2022, 23, and 24, he finished top 3 in the SEC in each of those 3 seasons. Went to the NCAA tournament every time, and lost to St. Peter's, and lost to Oakland. But I bet you when he's talking to his friends, he says, I was a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, and Jack Golke, who I had never heard of a week earlier, went wild on me and made 1 billion threes, and we got beat. You know, that's basketball. I bet you he doesn't think it's an indictment, or never did, of him not changing with the times the way so many other people viewed it. So when people are like, he needed to go to Arkansas and reinvent himself, I don't believe he believed that. And so his staff looks very similar to the way it's looked. And when I talk to other coaches, both in his league and out, they tell me right now that, and I say this as respectfully as I can say it, I know these people, but they wonder if John has surrounded himself with people who can help him. He is about to turn 66 years old. And sometimes it's helpful to surround yourself with people who have fresh ideas, new ideas, younger people with new approaches. Right now, his staff doesn't really check that box. And I think that's the next step after the season. If he ever wants to be what it is Arkansas thought he could be when they gave him all this money, both for him to coach and for him to build a roster with, if it's ever going to be that, I think it starts with him actually taking a fresh approach to things, a modernized approach to things. And that probably means staff changes where he can get some new voices in the building.
Yeah, Kenny Payne, a longtime assistant, obviously had the epic flame out at Louisville. He's on this staff. John Robick is notably not on this staff. And if you go back and look over the years and look at Calipari, for the most part, not every single year, but for the most part, when John Robick is employed by John Calipari, those teams do better than when John Robick is not. That's obviously notable as well. He may be, if not forced, certainly induced to make changes if it goes this way, because you can't keep going like this if you're Arkansas. This is a fan base that was waiting for a long time, decades, before Eric Musselman finally got them to the Sweet 16. You know, they went basically 2.5 decades without getting back to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. He did a good job, and then last year was a huge letdown. And now here they are, projected 5-13 team in the league. This season is a bust. Right now, I looked at the top 7 leagues at KenPom. Here are the teams as of Tuesday, January 1st, that have yet to win a conference game. We'll go from the bottom up. In the WCC, the number 7 league at KenPom, 0. Every single team has won at least one conference game. In the Mountain West, it's only Air Force. In the ACC, it's only Miami, which is the worst high major team in the country, and it's not close. Just allowed SMU to drop 117 on its program over the weekend. The Big East, everyone has won at least one game. In the Big 12, it's only Colorado. In the Big 10, none. Every Big 10 team has won at least one. In the SEC, it's South Carolina, which is regarded as the worst team, and then Arkansas. So at the high major level, there are only 4. But if you go to the top 7 conferences, only 5 teams yet to win a league game, and Arkansas is one of them. It's real bad, and they've got to make some big changes. And I know you're not prone to want to use the words impossible, and I get why, GP, kind of stave off the idea that it could happen. You don't want to say it couldn't, but I'm telling you right now, lost 5 in a row. They've got Georgia at home on Wednesday. It is a must-win. They've got Oklahoma this weekend. That's a must-win. Then they are at Kentucky. They're at Texas, home against Bama, home against LSU, which has already defeated them. And then they're at Texas A&M and at Auburn. There's no evidence that they're going to turn this around. The best win I saw in person at the Garden against Michigan, it was a narrow win. They got it. They were fortunate to get it. But other than that, they don't have a single win on the schedule of note. And this is shaping up to be the most disappointing, arguably, if not the most, certainly the second most disappointing season Calipari's ever had in his more than 30 years as a head coach.
Just 2-7 in the first 2 quadrants. 2 wins in the first 2 quadrants. On January 21st, 2025. Arkansas State has more than that. So does Bradley. So does UC Riverside. And making things even worse, I think, because it'd be bad no matter what, but there's tons of first-year coaches having incredible amounts of success. So you can't even be like it takes time, because it's not taking time at West Virginia. It's not taking time at Louisville. It's not taking time at Vanderbilt. And you know where else it's not taking time? Kentucky, the place you left. And they hired your replacement. And by most accounts, he had less resources. He inherited less, built an inferior roster just based on individual talent. But Mark Pope at Kentucky right now has a legitimate Final Four contender, a team that's spent weeks ranked in the top 10. And John Calipari at Arkansas, again, 0-5 in the SEC, just 2-7 in the first two quadrants, expected to miss the NCAA tournament in year one in Fayetteville. When we come back, we'll focus on some interesting results from the weekend. What were some of the wins that were good signs for certain teams, and perhaps some losses that were bad signs for other teams? We'll talk through all of that next. It's the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. We're on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast, CBS Sports Network. Lots of interesting results over the weekend. Norlander, here's what I want you to do. Of all of the upsets, and there was a pretty good list of them, what's an upset that happened where you think it's a sign of good things to come for the team that did the upsetting over the weekend? In other words, this team wasn't supposed to win this game, but, buddy, they did it, and now I think it's going to spark something big.
GP, I thought we had a number of these that can go either way. I'm curious to see when we get to, let's just say, the end of February and we look back at what's happened over the previous 4 to 6 weeks. Was this a pivot point for any kind of team, for the better or for worse? For the better, I think it's going to be Creighton. I think Creighton winning at UConn is going to indicate a shift to making the NCAA tournament. I think Creighton's going to get into the NCAAs and help the Big East be better than last season when it only got 3 teams into the big dance. I think the Big East will get at least 4, and Creighton will be in that group, joining at least UConn, St. John's, and Marquette. The reason why I say this, though, is obviously the coach, Greg McDermott, highly experienced, best coach in Creighton history, winningest coach in Creighton history. He's had an NCAA tournament-worthy team in 7 of the past 8 seasons. That includes 2020. They would have gone if we had a tournament, all that good stuff. And there's been 3 second weekend trips in that span. You add that with Ryan Kalkbrenner, a good presence in the middle. He's had some really good games this season. Hasn't been quite as good as I expect him to be, but he's really good, and maybe he's going to come on in the second half of the season. Stephen Ashworth, clearly, obviously, what his presence is. And then Jemiah Neal, who Arizona State transfer, he just had 24 against UConn. That was a career high. So all of that, they've got 2 tough road games left. They've got to play St. John's and Xavier. They've got other road games, but in terms of the ones where they could be an understandable underdog and might get picked off, there's those. But guess what? Like, they've got the UConn road game. That's in the rear view. Marquette, that's in the rear view. They have the wins against UConn, St. John's, Kansas. They've already defeated those teams. At 12-6, their resume is a little bit spotty, but I think they get it done. And because they're disciplined on defense, for the 4th straight season, they're going to be top 5 in fewest fouls committed per game if they continue their pattern, which they're going to do. A number of factors, but as I looked at the list of candidates, to me, Creighton popped out more than any other team.
Same question for me. I go with West Virginia over Iowa State. The Mountaineers were picked 13th in the preseason Big 12 poll, not by the stupid media. This was by the stupid coaches. The stupid coaches are the ones that did this one. People always like to blame the stupid media. Let's blame the stupid coaches. Who picked West Virginia to finish 13th in the Big 12? Big 12 coaches. That's it. Blame Bill Self and Kelvin Sampson. They're responsible. Text Scott Drew. He's responsible for this. It's not the stupid media this time.
The Wes Miller agenda will be exposed.
Yes. It's time. It's time for TJ Otzelberger's agenda to be exposed. The coaches picked West Virginia 13th in the Big 12 preseason poll. I've got them 25th in my top 25 and 1 now. They've got 4 quadrant 1 victories. They've beaten Iowa State, Kansas, Gonzaga, and Arizona. The losses are reasonable losses, and they're doing it even though their second leading scorer, Tucker DeVries, the coach's son, has missed the past 9 games with a upper body injury. Like, they're winning these games even without a guy who is and has been a key player. So in year 1 at West Virginia, Darren DeVries has got a basketball team that looks like it's headed for the NCAA tournament. And again, at least those silly coaches in the Big 12 didn't see this coming. And keep an eye on Javon Small. I bring this up. They're on our air tonight, CBS Sports Network. He's maybe a transfer from Oklahoma State, the biggest challenger to Hunter Dickinson for Big 12 Player of the Year honors right now. He got 27 points in the win against Iowa State. 2 games before that, got 26 points in a win over Colorado. He's now averaging 19.8 points, 5.2 assists, 5.2 rebounds, 1.9 steals per game. Like, he is an All-American level guard right now for West Virginia. And I really do think that victory over Iowa State over the weekend could propel them to a place not many people thought they were going to go in the preseason. That is the NCAA tournament. Let's now turn our attention to the other side of this. Tell me a team that was supposed to win its game this weekend, didn't win its game this weekend, and you think it could be a sign that maybe their season's about to perhaps go the other direction.
Number of candidates, I think. I mean, you could have gone the flip side with UConn losing at home to Creighton. I'm gonna say no. You could go with Marquette losing at home to Xavier. I'm gonna say no. Tennessee losing at Vandy. No, but they got an interesting game coming up here. Gonzaga losing at home to Santa Clara was a tempting one. I'm gonna pick Kentucky. GP. Kentucky allowed Alabama, and I want to put it in context. Okay, allowed 102 points on its floor. It's the defense. So Kentucky's been a really good story so far this season. It went 14-3 in its first 17 regular season games. It's got 14 games left before we get to postseason play. I could see it after going 14-3. I could see it going 7-7 down the stretch. Right now, Kentucky is not a national title contender. In fact, coincidentally enough, I wrote a story almost a year ago to the day about this very thing when under Calipari, Kentucky was a top 5, top 3 level offense, but it was a poor defense that was sub 75 at KenPom. Guess what? That's where it is right now. And I think that Alabama doing it again. Now, Bama's done it to some other teams as well. It's made a habit of getting, north of 95 a game, and Kentucky's a really good offense. It can also get 95 a game, but it's 82nd in adjusted defensive deficiency at KenPom right now. 10 teams in the past 27 NCAA tournaments have made the Final Four ranked 50th or worse in adjusted defensive efficiency, which includes Alabama last season. But Bama last season had an All-American guard in Mark Sears, and it ranked top 20 in three-point shooting, top 10 in two-point shooting, and top 25 from the free throw line in accuracy there. Kentucky right now is 50th nationally in three-point accuracy. It can make them, but it's not a great team. It's a good team. It's not a great team at three-point shooting. It's 26 in two-point shooting, which is even better, but it's not as good as Bama was a season ago. And it is not even top 100 in free throw accuracy right now. So it does not right now have the components that Alabama had on its way to a Final Four. And even then, Alabama didn't have the defense to win a national championship. It ran into the buzzsaw that was UConn in the national semis there. One more thing for me on this, GP, the schedule. It's critical. They've got at Vandy, at Tennessee, home to Arkansas, at Ole Miss in the next 4 games. So 3 road games out of the next 4, and then the home one, they should beat Arkansas, but I don't know. Calipari, maybe it gets weird. Who knows? They still have road games against Texas, Bama. They got to play Bama twice still. Oklahoma and Mizzou. They have to play Tennessee twice. They still have Auburn. So function of the schedule combined with everything I gave you, I think they're going to want, I think if you get to 20, I know Kentucky fans that you're going to be like, what? If you can get to 22 wins at the start of the SEC tournament, I think you'll have done well for yourself considering the league. And I just think the defense, unless Pope can really change something dramatically, maybe he can, but to this point we haven't seen it. That's why I think the one result from over the weekend that might be foreshadowing of what's to come is Kentucky sliding a little bit. Get into the tournament, no problem. But I don't know if we'll be talking about UK as a real top 10, top 12 list of Final Four contenders by the time we get to March 1.
And I hope folks don't move the goalpost on them, because when we were talking in the preseason, like I was asked by a UK beat writer, hey, what's a good season for Mark Pope look like in year 1? And I said, make the NCAA tournament. That's good enough. I mean, he inherited nothing from John Calipari, enrolled 9 Division I transfers, and has a team that's been sitting in the top 10 for parts of the season. If they end up not being a legitimate top 10 team, but instead closer to 22, but safely in the NCAA tournament, that's still a wildly successful season in year 1 under Mark Pope. It'll just mean that it might have peaked a little earlier, but I think they're going to be fine. Maybe not top 10 fine all season, but I don't think we're going to be talking bubble conversations that include Kentucky as Selection Sunday or the SEC tournament approaches. I'd go with Oregon. I had a few people ask heading into last weekend why I picked Purdue to beat Oregon at Oregon over the weekend, given that I had Oregon ahead of Purdue in the top 25 and 1. Like, that runs counter. The team you have ranked higher is at home. Why would you pick against them? Well, it's because with the top 25 and 1, as you know, at this point in the season, I'm doing to the best of my ability to just rank on resumes. I'm not really having many internal conversations about if I think this team's better than they've looked or better than what they've done. I'm just sort of respecting resumes. And heading into this past weekend, Oregon had 8 quadrant 1 wins. Now that number's down to 7 because of stuff that happened elsewhere. But still, like, the resume was impressive. But if you dug a little deeper, the substance of it wasn't as impressive. Yeah, they had 8 quadrant 1 wins heading into the weekend, but only 2 were over currently ranked teams, Alabama and Texas A&M. That was it. So I wasn't surprised that Purdue was able to go in there, upset Oregon. And it doesn't mean that I think Oregon's going to slip to the bottom of the Big Ten or miss the NCAA tournament. But here's another team that's been pretty high in the national polls in recent weeks because of the number of quality wins that they have based on the way that we view these things. But how many really good teams have they beaten? That number is much smaller than their number of quadrant 1 victories. And so if Oregon starts to slide the other direction in the Big Ten standings, that won't be a surprise to me. Like Kentucky, I still think they'll safely get in the NCAA tournament, but maybe not as good as the number that's been connected to their name in recent weeks would suggest. What do you think on Oregon real quick?
Yeah, well, and then I got a quick question for Kentucky before we move on to the next segment. I like the pick. I actually identified Oregon like 3 weeks back in the court report. First week of January, I said, listen, we get to January every year. There's usually 2 or 3 teams in the AP rankings that they're in there. They're looking good. The record is solid. But if you really dig into the numbers, they tend to be a little bit fraudulent and that they might be having a second half of the season fade. Oregon was there, along with Oklahoma and Memphis. Those were the 3 teams I identified, and then Oregon got picked off. I like Jackson Shellset a lot, but I like your pick, and I think there's something to that. Real quick on Kentucky. I could not agree more with you on not moving the goalposts, and at least from our podcast perspective, we'll try and maintain that as the season goes along and see how these results actually bear out. If I tell you right now, Kentucky, let's say Kentucky gets a 7 seed, but is upset by a 10, and it's a 3-point defeat in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Was year 1 under Mark Pope, and let's say they win 1 SEC tournament game, because that was also a bugaboo with Calipari. He had not won an SEC tournament game in a number of years, and that means a ton to that fan base. They win the SEC tournament 1 game at least, but they don't win an NCAA tournament, but they're wearing home whites. Is that a successful year 1 for Pope?
That's a successful year with an unfortunate ending, but a successful year.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. Yeah.
To have any opinion that runs counter to that would be moving the goalpost on them. They had nothing when he took the job. He took 9 transfers, and he would have got them into the NCAA tournament safely under your hypothetical. That's a good season with an unfortunate ending. And now let's see what he can do when he has full recruiting cycles, some real substance to his resume to recruit to, and all of the NIL resources that you have when you're the head coach at Kentucky. Now let's see what he can do with that type of roster. If I'm a Kentucky fan, I could not be more ecstatic about the way this thing is going, almost regardless of how the rest of the season unfolds. I don't want them to fall apart, but if they're in the NCAA tournament safely, that's a good year for Mark Pope in year 1. When we come back, turn our attention to the Big East, where former Kentucky coach has St. John's atop the league standings. Are the Johnnies about to win their first regular season Big East title since 1992? I'll ask Norlander that question. We'll do it next. It's the Eye on College Basketball Podcast, CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast on CBS Sports Network. Let's spend some time on the Big East. That's where St. John's sits alone atop the league standings, 16-3 overall, 7-1 in the Big East. Norlander, are the Johnnies about to win their first Big East title in the regular season since 1992? First off, did you realize it's been 1992? 1992? I was a freshman in high school in 1992. Now look at me. I am bald with 3 kids and high cholesterol. I think 1992 was a long 1992 was a long time ago, man. A lot of stuff's changed over the years.
There's a lot going on there. One, I feel like 92 was your freshman year of college and not high school. Someone fact checked that too. I didn't realize you were battling a cholesterol issue.
I don't think I'm battling it. It's just, my doctor says you should try to look at this a little bit. And I'm like, Doc, I'm doing the best I can.
Are you though? Are you?
Probably not.
Okay. All right.
I don't want you to be concerned. There's no reason to be concerned. Okay. I don't want you to be concerned. I'm okay. But
you mixed it in. You mixed it in the top off of the third segment here. I got some cholesterol issues. The last time St. John's did this, okay. I didn't even know what cholesterol meant.
I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm fine. Okay. I'm just saying that in 1992, my doctor wasn't talking to me about cholesterol, but now he just wants to talk to me about cholesterol. 92 was a long time ago. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Hypertension updates on the pod. What do you want from me? I did not think it was that long either. If you had trivia timed me, I probably would have. Honestly, I might have said like 98 or so, 99. Shouts to Eric Barkley. St. John's did win the Big East tournament in 2000, but last regular season championship is 92. The last time St. John's won a standalone Big East regular season championship was 85. And right now, St. John's is atop the Big East ledger on January 21st. It has not gotten this deep into January, being in first place in the Big East since 1986. Rick Pitino is doing the kinds of things that made his hiring such a lauded, celebrated thing, because this was always going to be a possibility. It was never going to be a guarantee, but getting to a point where you're 16-3 and you're in the mix in the Big East, it's cool to see this come to pass. I don't think they're going to win that's it. I don't think they're going to win the Big East. I would still give the edge to Marquette in that regard. And listen, the Big East is such an entertaining league with all sorts of unpredictable kind of results. I don't put it past UConn to figure out a way to win the league, or to have teams share first place and the Huskies being there. So I would still say no, but they will be top three, which I did have them in the preseason. I had UConn, then Marquette, then St. John's, projected 1, 2, 3 in that order in the Big East. I think that's how it's going to wind up playing out there. I'll note that the way they are doing this is what's interesting to me, because they brought in Kaderi Richmond and Davon Smith in the transfer portal. And Richmond statistically was among the 10 most accomplished players, maybe really among the 5 most accomplished players in the sport last season at Seton Hall. He has not been that at St. John's. I thought that he would truly give a push to be the Big East Player of the Year and be a first-team All-American. He's averaging 10.8 points per game. And Smith, who has been a widely contributing player. He's at a number of spots. He's at 10.3 points, but he's also, 4 and change in rebounds, 4 and change in assists. He's been productive, but those two players collectively have not been near what I thought they would be from impact. RJ Lewis leads the team in scoring at 17.8 points per game. And then Zuby Ejiofor is having himself quite the season here at 14.5 points per game. And he does so many other things well. So collectively on balance, they are much better across the board than I thought they'd be. I thought they might be more led by Richmond and Smith. I mean, even like Simeon Wiltshire, who I thought would be better than he's been, or more productive, he hasn't been that as well. So they're this at 16-3. What if they get even better? I certainly leave an opening to what you're putting on the table, Parrish. It's definitely possible St. John's can win the Big East, and what a story that would be. But even if that doesn't happen, and they're at worst third in the league, and they are in that conversation for a 3, 4, 5, 6 seed at worst. Incredible gains in year 2 under Pitino. What say you? And I don't know. I know you're probably not that surprised by it, but how do you think that Pitino's been able to do this relatively quickly after narrowly missing the dance last season?
Well, I think there's maybe a broader story here and a lesson for the sport here. I, like you, don't know if they'll be able to finish the job, as they say, and actually win the Big East title. I'm not ruling it out. I just think it's interesting that it's January 21st and we're having this conversation, very reasonably so. The broader lesson here would be this, perhaps. St. John's has done nothing or very little of anything for a long time. They have not won a Big East regular season title since 1992. Again, that was my freshman year of high school. I just, like with the Wikipedia, Billy Ray Cyrus had the #1 album in America for part of that year. I don't know if you saw any of the inauguration. He can't sing, and I'm not sure if he could back then. But he surely can't anymore. It was rough. So that was a long time ago. So what happened? How did we get here? Like if I were on radio in New York and they said, how did we get here? I said, well, you want the short answer or the long one? Short, buddy, it's radio. Okay, here's the quick version. They hired one of the greatest basketball minds of all time, and they gave him millions of dollars to roster build with in this NIL era. Here we are. Is there a lesson there? Is this, oh, by the way, we are one day removed from Ohio State University spending the most money ever on a football team that's ever been spent, as far as we know, and they win the national championship. And here's St. John's the next day atop the Big East standings when they did what? What did they do? Did they build a new practice facility? Did they schedule aggressively? Did they hire a new associate athletic director? Sure, all this stuff can play a role. Here's what they did. It's two things. They hired one of the greatest basketball minds of all time, and they gave him millions of dollars to go out and buy a basketball team, to go out and buy other Big East teams' best players. They gave him the money to do it, and this is the byproduct of it. That alone won't guarantee this, but it is a great place to start. That's what St. John's did, and that's why we're watching what we're watching.
There's not that many greatest minds in basketball history available to be hired to coach your program. So there's obviously limited supply of that. St. John's got it done, and it worked out well. He was at Iona previously, but it is building to be quite an interesting story. And I can't wait to see how the Big East race, St. John's, Marquette, UConn, Georgetown's probably not going to be a tournament team, but they won at Villanova on Monday night. What teams become spoilers, become factors? Does Xavier get in the mix here and become a tournament level team or a bubble team? We talked about Creighton. I'm big on the Blue Jays turning it around and making sure they get into the dance there. But UConn going for the three-peat was the big story in the Big East entering the season. And it's still a story that's lingering out there. But right alongside that now has become the emergence of St. John's. And if you think it's big now, if this team is 24-6, like it's going to be even bigger. In addition to Marquette, which has been a 2 seed level team and continuing to be that. It's not a super deep Big East. In fact, I can make the argument that the league has been a little bit of a letdown overall, but there's no shortage of storylines and still compelling coaches, players, and developments that are to come. And it's awesome. I'm always ready to see a team and a program, Parrish, that hasn't much mattered finally get back to the discussion. And in St. John's, we have that. And it seems like we're poised to be having this over the next 2 months.
When we come back, let's see if I can connect college football and college basketball. As mentioned, Ohio State won the national championship last night in college football, did it by beating Notre Dame. Irish made it all the way to the title game after losing to Northern Illinois, a so-called mid-major, earlier in the season. Obviously, in different eras of college football, this isn't even possible. You can't lose that game and play for a national championship, but it is possible in a 12-team playoff, and it's obviously possible in a 68-team tournament, which is what we have in the sport of men's basketball. Here's the question I got for Norlander. We're in January. Some very good teams have lost 2 mid-majors. Can you name one that you could see theoretically advancing all the way to the championship game of the college basketball tournament, the way Notre Dame went all the way to the championship game of the college football tournament? We'll discuss that next. The Eye on College Basketball Podcast. We're on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast on CBS Sports Network. On Monday night, Ohio State beat Notre Dame down in Atlanta to win college football's national championship. But still, part of the thing that made the title game interesting was that Notre Dame got there. Big brand, sure. But after earlier in the season, losing to Northern Illinois in different eras of college football, you can't lose a game like that and play for a national title. But now we have a 12-team playoff, and there was a path for Notre Dame to get there, and they did it, even if they fell short at the end. My question for you, Norlander, we got a 68-team tournament. So we're not only letting in teams that lose to mid-majors, we're letting in some mid-majors. Here's my question for you. Name a team that's already lost to a so-called mid-major so far this season that you could theoretically see advancing all the way to the title game of the NCAA tournament 2025 down in San Antonio. Not that you're predicting it, just that you could imagine.
I know. Well, I'll tell you this. Good topic, GP. Good stuff out of you. The options are slim. I took a look at the teams in the top 40 of the net rankings as of Tuesday. And right now, there are only 2 of them that have at least a Q3 or a Q4 loss, quad 3 or quad 4. Illinois has a quad 4 loss at home to, so it's not even a mid-major, that's to USC. And then North Carolina has a quad 3 loss, like Illinois, both quad 3 losses. And that just happened, I believe, over the weekend with the loss against Stanford at home. So that is just to say that teams at the top have been particularly strong. Now, you can still lose to a mid-major and have that be a quad 2 loss, and we've got a couple of candidates here. I will go. I don't even think you're having to, I'm trying to force myself into this because I can see it happening because this program has made multiple national title games. And this program is a really good offense. It's consistently rated as among the best offenses in the sport for the better part of the past decade. It is coming off a pair of bad losses, but it just barely gets in under the wire here, GP, and qualifies. I will say Gonzaga, 14-6, lost at home to Santa Clara, 103-99 to the Broncos. Shouts to Steve Nash because that's the last time Santa Clara had defeated a ranked team on the road when the Broncos did that back in '93. But because it's Mark Few, because the offense is among the best in the country, you've got a really good point guard in Ryan Nembhard. You've got a solid, reliable big in Graham Ike, and then some good pieces around him. Caleb Battle, who's on his 5th school in 5 years. He's a really quality player. Nolan Hickman has had some really nice moments. If you have to have lost to a mid-major, and I still think you can get to the title game, Gonzaga is my pick. I don't know if it's yours or not because I know there can't be more than 2 or 3 reasonable choices, but I'll go with the Zags.
I had 2 candidates that I was considering. Gonzaga, one of them, obviously, and that's a sensible pick. Might even be most people's pick. I went with Memphis. The Tigers have put together a pretty nice resume. They have 9 wins inside of the first 2 quadrants. Only Alabama and Auburn. Those are the only 2 teams in the country that have more right now. Now, this isn't going to hold. When we talk again next Tuesday, this will no longer be true. I mean, Memphis might still have 9 wins in the first 2 quadrants, but it will not rank second nationally anymore because Big Ten teams, SEC teams, Big 12 teams just are going to have way more opportunities to accumulate those going forward than Memphis is in the AAC. But what I'm telling you now is true. Well, the only 2 teams in the country with more wins inside the first 2 quadrants than Memphis is Alabama and Auburn. Memphis has already beaten a UConn team that we know is good, the back-to-back national champs. Already beaten a Michigan State team that is alone atop the Big Ten standings right now. Already beat a Missouri team that is among the bigger surprises in the SEC, ranked in the top 25 right now. The really only negative thing on the resume at this point is a home loss to a mid-major in Arkansas State. Now, Arkansas State isn't bad. Arkansas State could end up in the NCAA tournament, but Arkansas State is a quadrant 3 loss for Memphis. It was when it happened, still is today, will probably always remain quadrant 3 because for it to flip, they'd have to break into the top 75 of the net. And though Arkansas State, again, is good, probably not good enough to get where it needs to get so that can flip from quadrant 3 loss to quadrant 2. So that's always going to be something that drags Memphis down a little bit. But if we're looking at teams that have already lost them in majors, like you mentioned, there aren't many good ones that have. This is, by the way, when Memphis fans would get confused after the Arkansas State loss, when they would drop out of the AP poll or other times. The point I would try to make to them over and over again is you're the only team that has a loss like this in the rankings. Nobody else has lost. You've got some good wins, but this loss matters, and it's a bad one that most people have not experienced. That's still true. So our candidates for this question, limited. Gonzaga, Memphis, the 2 obvious ones, but when you consider that Memphis qualifies, and then you also understand that Memphis did beat Michigan State, UConn, and Missouri already, and has at moments with an All-American level backcourt in PJ Haggerty and Tyrese Hunter, look like one of the best teams in the country. I don't think it's a stretch to think Memphis could go from losing to Arkansas State on a random Sunday inside FedEx Forum to making a Sweet 16, an Elite 8, a Final 4, and maybe even the title game. To be clear, I'm not predicting it, but yeah, if I close my eyes and think real big, I could imagine it. One more segment to go before we get out of here. We want to take a real quick look at Tuesday night's schedule. We've got a triple header on CBS Sports Network, including a Big 12 game, Arizona State at West Virginia. We'll discuss Tuesday night's schedule real quick next. It's the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. We're on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast on CBS Sports Network. Before we get out of here, let's take a quick look at Tuesday night's schedule. We got a triple header on CBS Sports Network. I'm going to be in studio all night here in New York City with Brent Stover, Roy Hibbert, John Rothstein. 7 o'clock Eastern, VCU at Richmond. 9 Eastern, Arizona State at number 23 West Virginia. 11 Eastern, Wyoming at UNLV. And at the end of the night, we'll have a 30-minute episode of Inside College Basketball. Norlander, I already talked about West Virginia as a team that I thought had a big win this past weekend and could propel itself to nice stuff going forward. Javon Small on CBS Sports Network tonight. I don't know if 2 months ago you had him competing with Hunter Dickinson for Big 12 Player of the Year honors, but that's where we are right now. It's an interesting story happening at West Virginia, isn't it?
It is. I think if we had to do All-American ballots today, I'd have Javon Small as a third-team All-American. He's been awesome transfer from Oklahoma State and previously just an off-the-bench guy at East Carolina. So he's the second player to come from East Carolina in recent seasons and be a real factor on a team of note. Tristan Newton did the same thing, obviously becoming one of the all-time Husky greats there. By the way, on the previous segment, I do want to note at least UConn did lose to Dayton in Maui, and that's another team that's capable of getting to a title game, of course. So didn't want to neglect the Huskies there. Games on my radar tonight, real quick. 15-3 Wisconsin at UCLA. Just to see what Mick Cronin says after a win, after a loss. It doesn't seem to matter these days. So what's Mick Cronin got ready for us tonight? Louisville SMU is interesting to me. Louisville just entered the AP Top 25. Pat Kelsey's done a ton to overcome injuries there. SMU might have just put Miami. Miami didn't have a men's basketball team from 1971 to 1985. It just went and got 117 in Coral Gables. Maybe it has put that program on hiatus again. No matter the result, that's a hardcore kind of game, but I'm really fascinated to see that Louisville SMU Ponies matchup. Mizzou, Texas, the Longhorns 1-4 in the SEC. You almost cannot lose a game like this on your home floor. It's a high level matchup, a big resume opportunity, and Texas has already dropped some home games. Mizzou has done a complete turnaround. Those are interesting, but my number one game of the night is UNC Wake Forest. Carolina just lost near the buzzer against Stanford. Jalen Blakes, who was formerly at Duke, now plays for the Cardinal. That was a bit of a stinger there. And then Wake Forest has one loss. It's been a zipping GP under the radar. One loss since December 3rd. Hunter Salas has played like a top 3-5 player in the ACC over the past few weeks. Big spot for Wake Forest. They've got this, then they've got Duke. There's a lot coming here. This program hasn't been able to get through the tournament. Huge stretch over the next few weeks. It starts tonight against the Tar Heels. That game's going down in Winston-Salem.
You're exactly right about Wake Forest. They had high preseason expectations. They're not bad, but the computer numbers aren't good, and they don't have a national ranking. So I have to find myself every few days going, oh, okay, so how's Wake Forest doing? Because they're not naturally on your radar of top 25 stuff or even stuff you're considering for top 25. This is an opportunity, obviously, for them to get a big win. And then the Missouri-Texas stuff, that's just life in the SEC. Like you're Missouri, you're on a roll. You enter the AP poll. You're playing a Texas team that's been struggling. You're like, okay, this is a good spot. Now you're an underdog actually on the road against the top 50 KenPom team that's struggling, but it's still pretty good. Should be another fun night in the sport. Looking forward to it. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Terry Teagle, legend, Huck Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, Apple, Spotify. We'll be back with you next Tuesday, same time. Till then, take care.